Hey everybody, Trey here. Welcome back to another video. On the heels of yesterday's pretty impressive tornado outbreak across the Midwest and Mid-South, we have yet another day of severe weather on tap for today, as well as several other days after today that are going to see elevated severe weather risks across decent portions of the U.S. So in this video, we're going to break down the threats for each of these days. Don't want to spend too much time on any one particular day, as what happens one day could very well influence the following day, and we are certainly going to see some changes over the next several days as we get a little bit more clarity on the overall pattern and the convection from day to day. So let's go ahead and take a look at the SPC outlooks for the next 4 days. We have enhanced risks, level 3 out of 5, outlined for the next 3 days across different portions of the U.S. Here is today's outlook. Enhanced risk setting up there across parts of North Texas, really focusing right in on the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex, right in the center of that enhanced risk. Once again, level 3 out of 5 there. Up into southern Oklahoma and down toward the Waco area and areas southwest of the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex, under the gun for the greatest severe weather risk for today. Large slight risk extends all the way up into southern Kansas, parts of Arkansas, northern Louisiana, and down into southwest Texas. All hazards are going to be on the table for today. Tornado risk is going to be maximized in the 5% risk area. The brown shaded region you see there includes Waco, Dallas, up toward the Red River. That is going to be where the greatest threat for a few tornadoes are going to exist today, with the 2% area extending around that up into southern Kansas. Damaging wind also going to be a pretty significant threat for today, especially in that North Texas corridor, and large to very large hail. That same corridor is going to see the greatest threat for some pretty impressive hailstones there, 2 to 3+ inch in diameter hailstones, possible with any more isolated convection and more intense convection today. But we could see isolated large hail, very large hail up into southern Kansas, parts of Oklahoma, Arkansas, northern Louisiana, and down into southwest Texas. So that is today's outlook. Let's go ahead and go into tomorrow's outlook, Sunday, May 18th. The SPC has highlighted an enhanced risk centered right over the kind of eastern 2/3 of Kansas into northern Oklahoma. Includes places like Wichita up toward Topeka, Manhattan up toward the I-70 corridor, down into northern Oklahoma, Ponca City, Blackwell, under the gun for that greatest risk for tomorrow. Slight risk extends up into northeast Colorado, parts of Nebraska, Missouri, Arkansas, much of Oklahoma, into north central Texas. The tornado threat is going to be maximized in the Kansas vicinity tomorrow into northern Oklahoma. 10% hatched risk for tornadoes. Tomorrow is looking like a very interesting setup indeed. We'll get into that here in just a bit, but the tornado risk is going to be maximized in the yellow stippled region there, with large 2 and 5% risk areas surrounding that. Damaging wind and large to very large hail going to be a prominent risks as well. So all hazards threat going to extend into tomorrow, which is Sunday. Then we go into Monday. Monday perhaps has the highest ceiling of any of these days, given the confluence of ingredients that is expected to come together on Monday. But with a higher ceiling comes a lower floor, so there's still lots that can go wrong. But for now, the SPC has an enhanced risk from Missouri, northern Missouri, down to the southwest into North Texas, including places like Oklahoma City, Norman, Tulsa, Springfield, Joplin, Wichita, Kansas City, Jefferson City, up toward Hannibal, Missouri, all in that level 3 out of 5 enhanced risk for Monday, May 19th. Significant severe weather is possible. All severe hazards on the table for Monday as well, including tornadoes, a few of which could be strong. And finally, Tuesday. Tuesday now has a 30% enhanced risk equivalent contour, shifting pretty far east into Tennessee, northern Mississippi, northwest Alabama, with a large 15% risk surrounding that. So could see an elevated risk for some significant severe weather in the mid-south to southeast on Tuesday. So again, not going to take a look too deeply into any one day, perhaps a little bit more info that we have on today's threat and tomorrow's threat for now, but we will get into the subsequent days as they approach. I'll have videos hopefully each morning, the next few mornings as I have time to get some new information out as we have a little bit more clarity the morning of each of these events. But for now, let's go ahead and take a look at what's happening as we speak. This is the current 500 millibar map here. And this was our trough from yesterday that produced yesterday's significant severe weather outbreak across the Midwest into the Mid-South. That will continue to move off to the east and northeast today and kind of get out of our hair, making way for another trough, really a series of troughs that is expected to swing through the central U.S. over the next few days. Our first little wave in this wave train is situated down here across the desert southwest into the western Mexico vicinity. You see this strong belt of flow associated with this low amplitude trough here that is going to continue to swing through into the southern plains today, and that will be our main synoptic scale influence for severe weather in today's setup. You can kind of see behind this as well some troughing starting to take place toward the very left side of the image there across just off the Pacific coast. That is going to be our next in the series of troughs and will be our main impetus for severe weather Sunday and Monday and going into Tuesday as that ejects into the plains. But for now, we're dealing with this trough that will make its way up into the southern plains for today's setup. The surface pattern, not all that much going on here back in this region of the central and southern plains. We have our very strong surface low up there in the Great Lakes vicinity. That will continue again to move off and get out of our hair here over the next couple of days. We do have a severe threat up in the northeast today ahead of this surface low and the remnant trough that could provide an all hazards risk up there. But in our southern plains sector, not a ton going on as we speak. We are starting to see a little bit of that southwesterly flow from the trough aloft starting to impinge upon the higher terrain here of the southern Rockies. And as such, we've seen at least a very weak broad cyclone start to develop out across the southern high plains, eastern New Mexico into West Texas, east of which is a warm front. You see the pressure tongue right in there. We'll get into the actual surface obs here in a second, but we do have a warm front that is situated out across these areas that is demarcating the leading edge of the more robust moisture. That is going to lift off to the north today, and that could be a focused area for severe weather up into Oklahoma, with the main threat along the dry line to the south across parts of Texas. Here is our current surface map out across the southern plains here, and you see exactly where that warm front is located. Winds across Oklahoma at the moment out of the east-northeast with much more southerly or south-southeasterly flow to the south across Texas. So right there near the Red River is exactly where we're seeing this frontal zone parked at the moment. Actually, looks like it might be up here into eastern Oklahoma a little bit. You know what? On second thought, you see the temperature gradient down here in southeast Oklahoma into southwest Arkansas. So it looks like our front is actually maybe sagging down here a little bit, and then going up just north of the Red River vicinity, and then down to the west into northwest Texas. And that looks to be where our warm front is situated, at least at the moment. You can see that we will have a dry line that is going to set up here out across parts of Texas as well. You see dew points in the teens and single digits even out here across New Mexico and West Texas. Dew points in the 40s and 50s and now 60s and 70s out there the farther east you go into central Texas. So we are going to see a tight dry line set up out across parts of Texas, mixing east to probably somewhere there in the west central Texas vicinity today. And that will be a main initiating boundary for storms in today's setup. Again, the warm front is going to lift northward with time as we see the low-level winds strengthen out of the south. That's going to push that warm frontal boundary north to probably somewhere in far southern Kansas into northern Oklahoma, somewhere in that vicinity. And that could be a focus for severe storms later on. A little bit more of a conditional threat up north. We are going to see a little bit better chance for widespread convection down here across parts of Texas into southern Oklahoma. Up here from central into northwest Oklahoma, far southern Kansas, a little bit more conditional threat, but near that warm front as it lifts north, we may have enough forcing to initiate isolated supercells with that all hazards risk extending up there. Again, dew points pretty robust here out across Texas, along and south of the Red River. Dew points in the 70s all the way up to the Red River. Durant, Oklahoma, 72 over 70. DFW, 75 over 71 this morning. So very juicy air mass here at the surface that will continue to lift northward with time, and that is going to be parked over our area of interest for the next several days. Not going to see real sweeping of the moisture at all into areas to the south. We're going to see that dry line set up and be our main boundary for the next several days, which is why this looks kind of like a classic stretch for central and southern plains severe weather. This tight, robust dry line will be setting up with multiple impulses overspreading that dry line. That's your classic middle of May type of pattern. Here this morning, some soundings that we have released. This is at Norman this morning. We are well north of that warm front give, so not all that surprising that we see a pretty robust inversion in place. We do see some steeper lapse rates aloft here. Nice, perhaps elevated mixed layer there up above about 800 millibars or so. That will lead to pretty strong instability spreading its way north from Texas into Oklahoma today, providing the impetus for large to very large hail with these storms. We'll take a look at some forecast soundings here in a second. Deep layer shear already pretty strong, up 0 to 6 shear at about 50 knots or so. Long photographs at this point. Somewhat limited low-level shear, and that's not expected to change all that much through the day. We're not going to see a really robust low-level response with this incoming little wave. We might see a little bit of a deepening of the surface low with time, but overall not a super strong response in the low level. So that's going to keep the low-level shear fairly low today, especially across Texas, which should lead to more of a large hail and damaging wind risk. The tornado risk today is going to be dependent more on storm interactions and storm scale interactions and boundary interactions. But up near the warm front could be one exception. If storms do fire up across northern Oklahoma, southern Kansas, could be an area to watch for slightly increased tornado risk given slightly stronger low-level shear along the warm frontal zone. Down here across Dallas-Fort Worth, we are in the warm sector down here, so this gives us a little bit of a better picture of the environment that is going to be present in the warm sector. Already pretty strong instability in place, about 3,000 joules per kilogram mixed layer CAPE. Keep in mind this is at 7 a.m. Central Daylight Time, so very robust instability already in place here. Fat CAPE extending all the way up through the profile, elevated above this pretty stout capping inversion at about 850 millibars or so at the base of what appears to be this elevated mixed layer here. So again, robust instability at and above the freezing level, which is right here. That should lead to a significant risk for large to very large hail. Could see some hailstones approaching 3 to 4 inches in diameter today with any more isolated, intense supercells. Some drier air aloft as well. That could lead to some early issues in storms, kind of struggling a little bit, but we should have plenty of forcing with the incoming trough and plenty of low-level moisture to overcome that. With a little bit of drier air aloft, could be a little bit more sculpted type supercells today with less of that mid-level cloud cover that can clutter the views. So could be some photogenic stuff today, especially if any supercells fire across Oklahoma with a little bit less, little bit drier air aloft. Once again, deep layer shear is more than adequate for severe storms and organized convection. Effective shear above 40 knots there. Low-level shear on the weaker side, just like we saw in Oklahoma, given a somewhat limited low-level response at this point. So all in all, signs are pointing to pretty explosive convective development today, given already robust instability in place that is expected to increase, given surface heating that is expected to take place. We do see some cloud cover out here to the west, out across Texas, some high and low-level cloud cover, and this stream of high-level cloud cover just out ahead of the trough, streaming into parts of the high plains at this point. We'll have to wait and see how this persists. If we do see this move into the area of interest, especially across Oklahoma into Kansas, that could be somewhat of a hampering factor on the setup up there today for that isolated supercell threat. Down here across Texas, we will have more forcing mechanisms here, more directly in line with the incoming shortwave, with the stronger heating down here as well along the dry line. Should be a little bit more of an opportunity for widespread convective development. So just going to have to wait and see how this cloud cover plays out today, but overall shouldn't be too much of an issue. We should get some filtered sunshine overall at the very least to help continue to bolster that instability across the area. All right, here is our 6Z NAM. The 12Z NAM not quite out as I'm recording this morning. Here is our first little wave in this series of waves out here across the Baja California Peninsula, western Mexico, going to rapidly translate off to the northeast today into parts of Texas. We do have this little lead impulse as well. This little bit of slightly enhanced flow there impinging upon southwest Texas this morning. That will continue to swing through into parts of central and north Texas by late morning to early afternoon, and that could lead to relatively early convective initiation in this scenario. The dry line should be mixing east by this point, and with the slightly stronger flow, a little bit of extra forcing overspreading the dry line, we could see convective development as early as about lunchtime to early afternoon today across these areas. The cap should have no problem eroding today. Only mixed layer SIN only at about minus 100, so not going to take a ton to erode this cap. Continued moist advection continued warm, moist advection and surface heating should get the job done pretty easily, along with the forcing from the trough by as early as midday to early afternoon. Then we get the main wave back to the west to swing through into West Texas, eventually Northwest Texas by 0Z, 7 p.m. this evening, which should provide enough forcing for ascent even as far north as central to northern Oklahoma to allow for storms to initiate there, although it is, again, a little bit more conditional, given perhaps slightly weaker heating with northward extent and a little bit farther removed from the overall trough and the stronger flow aloft up there the farther north you go. But we should have enough forcing for ascent, especially across southern Oklahoma and Texas, to provide for widespread supercell development that will eventually congeal into an MCS. You see the trough behind this wave. That's our next trough for Sunday and Monday. We'll talk about that here in just a second. Down at the surface, once again, the surface response not expected to be all that robust today, given the very subtle nature of the mid and upper level trough. We will see some strengthening of that broad surface cyclone out across the central and southern high plains today to help really nicely back and strengthen the winds in the warm sector through the afternoon. And we should get that again. That'll allow that warm front to make its way northward out across those areas of central and northern Oklahoma, perhaps even as far as southern Kansas today. The NAM is pretty cool with surface temperatures here through the day. You see the light orange colors there. That indicates temperatures in the 60s. Could that be a NAM thing? It's very likely that that's probably just a NAM thing. But again, that cloud cover is something we're going to have to watch through the afternoon. If we get more persistent cloud cover out here across Oklahoma, that could be a hampering factor on the setup for today. But overall, here is our moisture. Moisture is situated along and south of the Red River for the most part this morning. That will continue to creep its way northward through the afternoon. We should get a nice narrow tongue of instability up into at least western and northwest Oklahoma by early afternoon. That warm frontal zone looks like it should be situated somewhere in that vicinity there, up from northwest Oklahoma, the Oklahoma Panhandle, down through southern Oklahoma. Whether I suspect it might very well be north of this area. If this is just a NAM thing, we'll see if the RAP has this as well. So you can see the warm frontal zone, the pressure tongue there, now progged to be somewhere in kind of central Oklahoma, right along the I-40 corridor there. It looks like the RAP has that tongue of moisture all the way up into central Oklahoma by mid-afternoon. By early evening, that tongue extends all the way up into the Oklahoma Panhandle, far southwest Kansas, which could be a focus for severe weather going into the evening hours today, especially as that secondary wave, the main wave, moves in. We should have forcing increase by late afternoon to early evening there, which would likely be the time of initiation for anything up here across parts of Oklahoma. But back to the NAM really quick here. Let's go ahead and take a look at a few soundings across the region for today. We'll take one here at 21Z. We'll take one, 21Z. We'll take one close to the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex, and then we'll take one up here in toward western Oklahoma along the I-40 corridor. So here's what we're dealing with today across parts of North Texas. We see very robust instability, 3,400 joules per kilogram mixed layer CAPE, 88 over 76 at the surface. Very juicy low-level air mass. Plenty of instability through the column. But this is why the large hail and damaging wind threat is going to be most evident today. You see the hodographs are pretty much straight line hodographs today. Very, very limited low-level shear. In fact, we decreased some from even this morning, which was on the low side. So very much straight hodographs today. That is going to lead to splitting supercells. We're going to have our right splits and our left splits leading to lots of storm interactions today, which will likely lead to a pretty quick upscale growth with this activity. Initially, supercells will be the favored mode, given initiation along the dry line. Dry line is oriented fairly north-south across these areas, maybe just a slight slant from northeast to southwest, but overall, the shear vectors are fairly perpendicular to the initiating boundary, which would normally indicate more discrete activity, but because we're going to have such a prevalence of splitting supercells in this environment, given very straight line hodographs, there is the potential, and a pretty good potential at that, for a very high level of storm interactions and storm, an overall congealing into a more messy mode fairly quickly in this environment. Left splits today could have the potential to produce very large hail, 3 to 4 plus inch in diameter hailstones, especially with the left splits. Right splits as well will have that opportunity. And again, the tornado risk is going to be very much dependent, especially down here across Texas, on the level of favorable storm and boundary interactions. So I think today mostly going to be a large hail and damaging wind risk, and especially a damaging wind risk as things congeal into more of a complex across southern Oklahoma and North Texas going into the early evening hours. Here's what we're dealing with farther north, however, near the warm front. You can see that the photographs are much more favorable for tornadic activity along the warm front. We do see the NAM have a little bit of a capping inversion remain in place through about 21Z. This is 4 p.m. Central Daylight Time. Very robust instability above that capping inversion, 3,300 joules per kilogram mixed layer CAPE. I suspect 79 degrees is a bit too cool up here out across these areas, and if we do get into the 80s today, I suspect that we will see this capping inversion be not much of an issue at all. We should have some forcing from the trough as well, and as that warm front lifts north, that'll lead to some forcing as well. So, if a supercell or two fire along the warm frontal zone as it lifts north, I would suspect those would pose a risk for all severe hazards. Now, one thing to note is, again, the degree of left splits down here across Texas. We should see splitting supercells. That's probably going to send some left splits up here to the north, up into this area. Could that wreck the environment for later on? Remains to be seen. If we see a less degree of left splits getting up into this warm frontal zone up in here, then we shouldn't have an issue. Especially back to the west, we might be free and clear of that issue anyway. But that is something to watch going into the afternoon. If we have a lot of left splits making their way up here into central Oklahoma, that could lead to a decrease in the overall risk and a decrease in the potency of the environment overall. But still, near that warm frontal zone, plenty of instability with robust deep layer and low level shear could lead to an all hazards risk for any supercells that do fire. So here by 0Z, that warm front lifting up to northwest Oklahoma, far northeast Texas panhandle. Nice narrow plume of instability up in here. We'll take a sounding from the warm frontal zone there, and then by 0Z, we'll take one there in kind of northeast Texas ahead of the complex. So here you go. So the capping inversion here on the NAM, very, very strong. 71 degrees on the NAM. That seems quite cool to me, but again, the degree of cloud cover could be something to watch today. But overall, if we have instability remaining with this kind of low-level shear, that would be something to watch for sure, but that's what's making this threat up there a little bit more conditional. Down to the south, we remain in a very highly unstable environment with very limited low-level shear to promote more of a large hail and damaging wind risk, and especially damaging wind risk as storms kind of congeal into more of a line. Here's the 12Z herd just to show you what is going on here today. You see by mid-afternoon or so, storms start to fire, lots of activity. This is an interesting development here. So the HRRR is now developing a lot of storms there in western to northwest Oklahoma by mid to late afternoon, kind of congealing into a complex as well, but those would have the greatest threat for tornado potential today, I think, if they can remain fairly discreet and intense. You do see quite a bit of left split activity, though, making its way up into central and northern Oklahoma with time. So what impact that has on the environment remains to be seen. But overall, you see several supercells along the dry line by mid to late afternoon, and then they quickly congeal into more of a clustered linear mode with time going into early evening. So that is what we have going on for today. At this point, looks again like your best chance for the highest coverage down here from southern Oklahoma into Texas, with a more conditional risk up here into western to central Oklahoma and northwest Oklahoma as well. All right, let's back things out here, and we'll take a look at tomorrow's threat. So tomorrow has been on my radar, no pun intended, for quite some time now. This has looked like a pretty classic setup with somewhat more meager forcing than Monday, which could lead to a more isolated supercell mode. Let's take a look at the 500 millibar map here on the NAM going into tomorrow. So here is that wave for today, and then here's our trailing wave for the Sunday threat. You can see it's already taking on a nice shape there, starts to dig down into the desert southwest going into the morning tomorrow, Sunday. And then it starts to take on a nice negative tilt as it ejects into the southern and central high plains by mid-afternoon tomorrow. This is 4 p.m. Central Daylight Time tomorrow. Trough axis right in here across Colorado into New Mexico and West Texas. And right out ahead of that, nicely positioned in the exit region of that trough, is going to be our portion of Kansas into Oklahoma that is under the gun for that severe weather risk for tomorrow. Continues to eject off to the east tomorrow evening. Notice, though, how the height falls are not all that pronounced with this setup. You see, again, the height contours, the geopotential height contours. For robust height falls, we want to see a location there those height contours really move to the east of a certain of locations in the overall risk area for robust height falls. And if you focus on those geopotential height contours, you see they don't really move all that much going into the afternoon. So fairly neutral height falls through the day until probably late into going into Monday. So that is going to keep the overall synoptic forcing on Sunday on the weaker side. We do have this trough moving in, starting to overspread the dry line Sunday, but overall height falls are fairly minimal. That could lead to a little bit less forcing, a little bit better potential for discrete isolated supercells. If we go down here to the surface, we will start to see a much more robust low-level response than what we're going to see today. Again, by early evening today, we'll start to see maybe a slight deepening of the surface cyclone out there across the southern high plains, but going into tomorrow, as that main trough starts to really impinge upon the higher terrain of the Rockies, we will see robust surface cyclogenesis out there across eastern Colorado, helping to really define our boundaries for tomorrow. By 0Z tomorrow, that low is going to be right there in kind of the Colorado-Kansas border region, right in there, and we'll have a nice warm sector leading up into that surface cyclone there. So here we are on the NAM, very robust moisture advection off to the north. I'll back it out here for you. So here by 0Z, that warm front, very narrow warm frontal zone up there into far southwest Kansas, northwest Oklahoma, and that'll continue to make its way off to the north tomorrow. And then by the time we get that rapid cyclogenesis to take place, that dry line will be surging north pretty robustly going into tomorrow afternoon and early evening to provide for an impetus for robust supercell development out across that dry line. So the overall forcing being relatively weak synoptically, and then our shear vectors nice and perpendicular to that dry line should lead to a very discrete supercell mode tomorrow for Sunday. This is why this event has had this has been on my radar for quite some time, as the storm mode has looked to be very discrete, just a nice classic mid to late May dry line setup with a low amplitude trough overspreading the dry line by mid to late afternoon. Now the NAM could be a little bit far west here. We'll just have to wait and see how this plays out, where the dry line actually sets up. But we should have moisture. The NAM has 70s dew points up into south central Kansas by 0Z tomorrow, and just a nice arcing dry line there from Oklahoma into Kansas. So, and again, we'll see that forcing start to overspread the dry line by mid to late afternoon for supercell development. Down here in Oklahoma, a little bit more conditional, a little bit more in question as far as the forcing goes. Again, fairly neutral heights. The overall strongest winds with this jet streak will be relegated off to the northwest of the region. So farther south from northern Oklahoma southward into parts of Texas even, a little bit of a conditional threat at this point for supercell development. Still, with this type of a dry line in place, I would not be surprised to see some isolated convective development along the dry line by mid to late afternoon to evening. Especially just look at this dry line. You have dew points in the 20s on the west side, dew points in the 70s immediately to the east. That's a very tight dry line. Should be fairly strong convergence along the dry line as well. You see that in the surface wind barbs there. So I suspect that we should see a good amount, at least a good chance for supercell development farther south along the dry line from Oklahoma southward, perhaps even as far south as North Texas. But looks like our favorite area, most likely area for storm development, is going to be up in Kansas, where that moisture kind of arcs back into the low. Your dry line, warm frontal zone could be a favorite area for supercell development there near the triple point. A couple of soundings here out across these areas. We'll take one just ahead of the dry line here at 0Z. Then we'll take one down into north central Oklahoma near the Enid area. And this is what we're dealing with. The NAM, again, probably way too cool with the surface temperature, so don't really mind the strong capping inversion in place. We do have quite a bit of drier air aloft as well to work through. Don't know if that's going to be much of an issue tomorrow. Could be a NAM quirk, could be something we have to watch for, but overall, those wind profiles, pretty intense with effective SRH above 400 meters squared per second squared. And then down to the south, that is a good-looking profile as well across northern Oklahoma. That might be your sweet spot, just ahead of the bulge in the dry line there, kind of southern Kansas into northern Oklahoma could be a favored spot right there ahead of the dry line bulge with this kind of environment. Super strong instability. The NAM progging 5,600 joules per kilogram mixed layer CAPE. It's probably on the high side, but still, you take a little bit off that, we're still dealing with extreme instability. With this kind of a wind profile, strongly veering and strengthening low-level winds with height, nice streamwise vorticity. and strong deep layer shear for supercells certainly would favor all severe hazards, including significant tornadoes. 84 over 74 at the surface, fairly deep moisture. This is a pretty classic plains environment for significant tornadic activity. So definitely something to watch tomorrow. And just if we have an early peek here at tomorrow on the cams, just for giggles here, you see a lot of activity developing across Oklahoma and Kansas, with some robust supercells in there out across that corridor by tomorrow afternoon and evening. So definitely something to watch tomorrow. Could be a pretty potent day for discrete supercells along the dry line. Then we go into Monday. So Monday here, you see this is kind of just a complex trough here across the western half of the U.S. Lead shortwave ejecting into the Central Plains Monday or Sunday evening. Then we have the secondary wave back to the west embedded within the larger trough. That is going to be swing through going into the day on Monday. We will have a nice broad belt of enhanced flow impinging upon the central to southern plains on Monday that will provide the impetus for severe storms going perhaps as early as midday to early afternoon on Monday along the dry line. Dry line should once again be very, very tight on Monday. You see the very tight dry line there extending up into southern and southeast Nebraska, and it just kind of sits there. The warm front doesn't move a whole lot through the day. Warm frontal zone situated up here, southeast Nebraska eastward, dry line down to the south, robust moisture south of the dry line, and with a little bit stronger forcing overspreading the dry line here on Monday, we could again have a higher ceiling, a little bit more forcing on Monday, a little less conditional threat along the length of the dry line on Monday, but we could see a few more fail modes, especially with storm mode. Storm mode could be an issue here given stronger forcing. We do have our dry line up here from Kansas into Oklahoma, and our shear vectors should be fairly perpendicular to the dry line, especially across Oklahoma. But we do have a lot more forcing, which could lead to more convective coverage and a lot more storm interaction. So Monday, again, higher ceiling day, but with a higher ceiling becomes a lower floor and more failure modes possible, especially with storm mode and storm coverage. So, but Monday definitely looks potent as well. And then we get into Tuesday. I'll back this out here once again. And Tuesday, the threat shifts off to the east as the main trough ejects into the mid-south region. Not quite out super far on the NAM, so we'll go to the GFS here real quick. You see a nice, robust shortwave rotating through the mid-south and southeast, providing the impetus for severe weather out in that region. Tuesday, broad surface low there as well, with the warm sector to the south. A little bit of a messy warm sector, not a super well-defined warm sector here. But overall, we could see the threat for significant severe weather developing on Tuesday as that shortwave translates through into the mid-south and southeast with all severe hazards. This is a GFS sounding. Don't usually like to take the GFS soundings at face value, especially at this range, as they can be a little bit wonky. But overall, we should have enough instability and low-level and deep layer shear to support that all hazards threat on Tuesday. But we'll have more information on these later days in this stretch as they get closer here during this weekend into early next week. So that is what we have going on for the next several days. Again, we'll start off with today across parts of the southern plains. The SPC for now has an enhanced risk there in the North Texas corridor centered on the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex, southern Oklahoma, places like Ardmore, the WinStar Casino there in Thackerville, down toward Denton, Dallas-Fort Worth, the entire Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex in that greatest threat for severe weather today, down toward the Waco area and areas southwest of Dallas, with a large slight risk extending up into southern Kansas and Oklahoma, Arkansas, down into southwest Texas. SPC has the greatest tornado risk today down in the North Texas corridor. Again, hodographs should remain fairly straight line today, so I'm expecting more of a large hail and damaging wind risk. But if we have favorable storm interactions here, we could see a tornado risk develop, especially within the brown shaded region there. Conditional risk, again, up to the north, a little bit more conditional as far as supercell development goes. But if we do see some storms fire near that warm frontal zone from central into northwest Oklahoma, far southern Kansas, I do think those could have the greatest threat for a tornado or two, given stronger low-level shear along the warm frontal zone. So definitely keep that in mind. SPC has a 2% risk out there to cover that. But I think the main risks today Going to be large to very large hail, perhaps 3 to 4 inches in diameter, especially with any more robust left split supercells. Down here across southern Oklahoma, North Texas, those could have some 3 to 4 plus inch in diameter hailstones, but all the way across the risk area today, a large to very large hail is expected, and then damaging winds, especially across North Texas, as storms congeal into more of a line going into this evening. So that is today. Then we go into tomorrow. Tomorrow definitely has my eye still for a pretty robust supercell threat with all hazards possible. Tomorrow, again, the greatest threat tomorrow going to be across parts of Kansas, where forcing is strongest ahead of the surface low there, and where a little bit stronger forcing is expected to overspread the dry line by mid to late afternoon. Down south into Oklahoma, from northern Oklahoma southward into North Texas, a little bit more conditional. We do have a little bit less forcing down here, a little bit stronger capping perhaps, but if storms do develop, they would have the potential to produce all severe hazards. The sweet spot might be ahead of the arcing dry line across south central Kansas into northern Oklahoma there in southern portions of the enhanced risk area. So definitely looks pretty potent tomorrow. Supercells that do fire will have that all hazards risk, including a threat for strong tornadoes there in the 10% hashed area, damaging winds, and large to very large hail. Then Monday, again, higher ceiling, lower floor day because we have a little bit more forcing overspreading the dry line, but enhanced risk for now across Missouri, eastern Kansas, Oklahoma, into northwest Arkansas for the threat for widespread significant severe storms with an all hazards threat that could include a threat for significant tornadoes. Then Tuesday, again, we'll have more information on these later days as we get closer, but for Tuesday, the enhanced risk shifts off into the mid-south and southeast, with the trough ejecting into that region and the warm sector being fairly juicy out across that area. All hazards threat could take place there. So an active stretch continues for us on the heels of our last few days that have been pretty potent as far as tornadic activity goes. Could see more of the same here over the next several days, starting with today, Saturday, and we'll perhaps have that threat peak Sunday into Monday and even Tuesday as the system moves off to the east. So for now, I'll be back with more videos as needed as these setups approach, but for now, thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.